Parents didn't just skip my house closing, they tried to make sure it never happened at all. I found out on a Tuesday, 3 days before I was supposed to sign the papers. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee that had gone cold, going through my emails on autopilot, when I saw the subject line from my mortgage lender: action required, additional liability discovered. I read it twice. Then I read it a third time, slower, because the words weren't making sense the way words usually do. There was a personal loan in my name, opened 18 months ago, balance just under $19,000. I had never seen it before in my life. I sat there for a long time after that. The coffee stayed cold. The morning light moved across the floor the way it does when you're not paying attention to anything except the thing that just broke open inside your chest. I want to tell you something first, before I get into all of it. I'm not someone who likes drama. I'm not someone who cuts people off easily or holds grudges or needs to win. I spent most of my 20s being the person in my family who kept the peace, who showed up, who said yes when I should have said no, and it's fine when it was never fine. I say that not to make myself sound noble, I say it because I want you to understand that what I'm about to tell you did not come from nowhere. It came from 31 years of somewhere. My name is not important. What matters is that I'm a 31-year-old woman who worked her way through college without help, got a decent job in healthcare administration, lived below her means for 7 years, and finally, scraped together enough for a down payment on a small house in a quiet part of town. 2 bedrooms, a yard with 1 tree in it, a garage that needed work. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It was supposed to be mine. I grew up in a house where money was always tight and always someone else's fault. My dad worked in bursts, good months, followed by long stretches of nothing. My mom managed the house and managed us 3 kids and managed to stretch every dollar further than dollars are meant to go. I don't blame them for being poor, I never did, but somewhere along the way, the fact that I had started to do better got reframed in their minds as an obligation. Like my salary was a shared resource I had just been temporarily holding for them. It started small, the way these things always do. $100 here when the water bill got behind. Gas money when my dad's truck needed repairs. Groceries dropped off when my younger brother was between jobs. I didn't keep track because keeping track felt cold, and I was not a cold person. I was the responsible one, the one who had it together, the one who could handle it. Then I met my husband at work, a logistics coordinator named, let's say, someone who is completely unimportant to this story, except that he was kind and steady and the first person who ever looked at the way I handled my family and said, quietly and without drama, that's not normal. We dated for 2 years. We got engaged. We decided we wanted to buy a home before we got married, something to build toward together. I had been saving seriously since I was 24. He had savings too. We were careful. We were methodical. We were ready. What I didn't know, what I had no reason to suspect, was that my parents had been using my name. Not borrowing money and paying it back, using my name. My social security number. My credit history that I had spent a decade building with nothing but discipline and delayed gratification. They had opened a personal loan through an online lender 18 months ago. They had been making minimum payments, just enough to keep it from going to collections, just enough so I wouldn't see it in my regular credit check, which I apparently hadn't run in the months before we went under contract on the house. The lender flagged it when I applied for the mortgage. $18,912 plus interest. I called my mom from the driveway of my apartment complex because I didn't want to fall apart inside where my neighbors might hear. I told her what I had found. I asked her to explain it to me. I was calm. My voice was steady. I was giving her the benefit of the doubt, even as every cell in my body was screaming. She didn't deny it. She said they had been in a tight spot. She said they had meant to pay it back before I ever found out. She said they didn't think it would be a problem because you always figure things out. She said it like that was a compliment, like my competence was the reason it was okay to do this to me. I asked her how they got my information. She got quiet, and then she said my younger brother had helped them. I had to put the phone down for a minute. I set it on the hood of my car and looked at the parking lot and breathed the way you breathe when you are trying not to become a person who screams in a parking lot at 10 in the morning. My brother. who I had lent money to without interest, who I had helped move twice, who I had sat up with on the phone when he was going through his divorce talking for hours because that's what you do when it's family. When I picked the phone back up, I asked my mom one question. I said, "Did you know this would put my house purchase at risk?" She said, "We didn't think it would get this complicated." That was it. That was the whole thing. $18,000 stolen from my credit history, my closing date 3 days away, and the explanation was, we didn't think it would get this complicated. I want to tell you that I cried right then. I didn't. I think I had gone somewhere past crying into a kind of cold clarity I had never accessed before. I told her I needed to talk to my lender. I told her I would call her back. I never called her back. My husband and I spent the next 48 hours on the phone with the lender, with our real estate agent, with an attorney I found through a legal services referral. The loan was fraudulent. It was opened without my knowledge or consent. That made it identity theft technically, legally, without question. Our attorney was the one who said that word out loud first. Theft? And something about hearing it from a professional mouth made it real in a way it hadn't been before. We had options. We could delay the closing, dispute the loan, file a police report, and request a fraud investigation through the credit bureaus. It would take weeks, possibly months. Or we could close on time if my husband could carry a larger share of the financing temporarily while the fraud case worked its way through. We chose to close. I don't know why exactly, except that I had worked too long and too hard and too carefully for this house to let them take it from me the way they had taken so much else. My husband agreed without hesitation. He just looked at me and said, "We're not letting them win this one," and I had to excuse myself to the bathroom so he wouldn't see me cry. We closed on a Thursday morning. It was overcast. My husband brought coffee in a thermos because the closing office was across town, and we had to be there at 8. We signed a lot of papers. The attorney who handled the closing asked if we were excited, and I said yes, because what else do you say? On the way home, I rolled down the window even though it was cold, and I let the air hit my face, and I didn't say anything for a long time. That afternoon, I filed the police report. I want to be honest about what that felt like, because a lot of people in situations like mine spend years not filing the report. They protect their families from consequences because they have spent their whole lives being the protection. I thought about not filing it. I sat with the option for about 20 minutes, and then I thought about the parking lot. I thought about we didn't think it would get this complicated. I thought about the way my mom said you always figure things out, like my figuring things out was something that happened to them rather than something I did alone at significant personal cost over many years. I filed the report. The officer who took my statement was professional and matter-of-fact. She did not make me feel dramatic. She asked me to document everything, the loan statements, the dates, the call with my mom. She told me that because my brother had provided my personal information, he could be considered a co-conspirator to identity theft, depending on how the investigation developed. She used the phrase, "This is a serious crime," without any hesitation. I drove home and sat in the driveway of my new house, and looked at the front door for a while. My mom called twice that week. My brother texted 3 times, variations of "can we talk" that got progressively more urgent as the week went on. My dad, who had been largely absent from the whole situation in the way he was largely absent from most situations, sent a single voicemail that I didn't listen to until much later. When I finally played it, it was 40 seconds of him clearing his throat and saying he hoped we could work this out and that family was the most important thing. Family. He said family. I thought about all the families I had watched from the outside. Friends whose parents showed up. Parents who took days off work to help their kids move. Parents who threw small celebrations for milestones and asked questions about your job and remembered the name of your boss. I had always told myself I wasn't jealous of those things. I had told myself that my family showed love differently, that their way wasn't wrong, just different, just harder to read. I stopped telling myself that. What I did next was not dramatic. It did not involve a speech or a confrontation or a scene. I am not a person who does scenes. What I did was deliberate and quiet, and took about 3 weeks to execute fully. I contacted a consumer attorney who specialized in identity theft cases. She sent formal letters to both my parents and my brother on my behalf. outlining the fraud and notifying them that I was pursuing a civil claim for damages in addition to the criminal investigation. The criminal side was out of my hands. The police handled that. The civil side was mine. I closed the joint phone plan I had been carrying my younger brother on for 2 years because he claimed he couldn't afford his own. I removed my parents as beneficiaries from my life insurance policy, which I had quietly updated years ago during a period of generosity I no longer felt. I updated my emergency contacts at work, and I changed my address. Not dramatically, I just stopped giving them the new one. My husband asked me once, in the quiet way he asks things, whether I was okay. Not okay in the how are you doing way, but okay in the I see what this is costing you and I want to know if you're carrying it alone way. I told him I was doing better than I expected. He said that made sense, that sometimes when something you've been fearing becomes a thing that already happened, it stops being as heavy. He was right, actually. The grief was there. It was real, but underneath it was something I hadn't expected: relief. The kind of relief that comes when you stop waiting for something bad to happen because the bad thing already happened and you survived it and now you know what you're made of. My mom left a voicemail around 6 weeks after the closing. I'm not going to describe the whole thing because I don't think it deserves that. I will say that she cried. I will say that she used the phrase, "I thought we were closer than this." I will say that at no point did she say the word sorry. Not for what they took from me. Not for the risk they put me in. Not for the 18 months of minimum payments they made on a fraudulent loan while I was saving carefully for a house. I did not call back. My attorney advised me not to have direct contact while the civil case was pending, which was a professional reason that also served a personal need I hadn't fully articulated. I did not want to hear her voice and feel myself soften. I did not want to be talked into forgiveness before I was ready. I have always softened too quickly. I've always traded my own stability for theirs. Not anymore. The investigation is still working through the system. These things take time. I have learned a lot in the past several months about how identity theft cases proceed, about the difference between civil and criminal liability, about what counts as evidence and what doesn't. I have learned that the financial damage my parents caused me, the higher interest rate I was forced to accept because of the additional liability, the legal fees, the hours of documentation and calls and appointments, adds up to more than just the original loan. It adds up to a number that still makes me angry when I think about it too long. But I try not to think about it too long. What I think about instead is the tree in my yard. It's a decent-sized maple, I think, though I'm not great at identifying trees. In the fall, it turned a color I don't have a word for, somewhere between copper and rust and the inside of a fire. My husband took a photo of it and made it his phone background, without telling me, and I saw it one morning when he left his phone on the counter. And I felt something shift in my chest that wasn't grief at all. We're getting married in the spring. Small, just people who actually show up. I used to think that the hardest part of building a life was the work. The saving, the planning, the choosing carefully, the starting over when things fell apart. I thought if I could just get through the hard years, the rest would follow. I didn't know that sometimes the people you're building away from will try to pull the whole thing down on their way out. But here is what I know now. They didn't. The house is mine. The marriage is coming. The tree is copper and rust and the inside of a fire. And in the spring, it will probably do something entirely different, and I will be here to see it. I survived the thing I always feared most, being abandoned by my own family. And what I found on the other side wasn't emptiness. It was mine. All of it, finally, just mine. I used to think that what happened to me was just bad luck. Wrong place, wrong timing, wrong family. I spent a long time trying to fit it into a story where nobody was really at fault, where my parents were just desperate, where my brother was just weak, where I was just caught in the middle of something that wasn't personal. It was personal, and the sooner I stopped pretending otherwise, the sooner I could actually breathe. Here's what I've come to understand, not from a book or a therapist or anything anyone told me, but from living through it. The way things end up is almost never random. My parents didn't open a loan in my name because they ran out of options. They did it because, for years, I had shown them that I would absorb the consequences of their choices. Every time I said, "It's fine," every time I covered the gap and didn't ask questions, I was teaching them what was possible. That's not blame I'm putting on myself. It's just cause and effect, plain and honest. What you allow continues. What you never name never stops. What finally changed things wasn't anger, it was clarity. There's a difference. Anger is loud and it burns through you and it makes you say things you have to walk back later. Clarity is quiet. Clarity is sitting in a parking lot after a phone call and realizing you already know what you have to do. That morning in the driveway, when I put the phone down on the hood of my car and just breathed, that was the moment I stopped asking how could they and started asking what do I do next. That shift from grief to decision is the only thing that actually moved my life forward. I think a lot about integrity now in a way I didn't used to. Not in a grand philosophical sense, just in the daily sense of doing what you said you'd do. Being honest about what you see, not looking away from something because looking at it is uncomfortable. My parents lacked that. My brother lacked it. I had built my entire adult life around it without even realizing that's what I was doing. Saving carefully, working honestly, showing up reliably, and then one morning I found out that the people I came from had been quietly dismantling it from the inside. Filing that police report was the hardest thing I've done, not because I doubted it was right, because doing it required me to finally be as honest with the world as I had always been with myself. It required me to say out loud, this was a crime. These are the people who did it, and I am not going to protect them from that truth. And then I had to keep going anyway. Close on the house, sign the papers, drive home with the window down in the cold. That's the part nobody tells you about resilience. It's not a feeling, it's a behavior. You don't feel strong and then act. You act, and somewhere in the middle of the acting, you discover you were stronger than you thought. The tree in my yard turned copper in the fall. My husband made it his phone background without telling me. We're getting married in the spring. I didn't get here because things got easier. I got here because I stopped making it easier for the wrong people.